Every Saturday morning, a specific scent drifts across suburban America. Sharp, metallic, the chemical signature of synthetic herbicides settling into warm grass. Most people inhale that scent and feel something close to satisfaction. They look at a carpet of uniform green, perfectly leveled, entirely sterile, and they see order, civic pride, a property value protected. But something changed in American yards around 1945. Not the plants. The plants stayed exactly the same ones indigenous communities harvested deliberately, the same ones European settlers documented in their journals as food sources, the same ones Greek physicians prescribed 2,000 years before the first subdivision was built. The plants didn't change. The word did. Weed. As a commercial category, as a thing requiring elimination, as a problem with a product-shaped solution. That's a post-war invention. The same chemical infrastructure built for the Pacific Theatre needed a domestic market when the war ended. The American lawn became the target. Within a decade, a carpet of identical grass, chemically enforced, became the visual symbol of prosperity. And everything that grew without permission became evidence of failure. What you have been taught to see as a badly maintained yard is actually something else. A rescue mission. The soil is not broken. It is sending up specialized biological workers to correct what we have ruined. And we have spent 70 years paying a multi-billion-dollar industry to help us stop it. Hold that timeline in your mind as we go through these 10 plants, because this isn't a video about hidden nutritional value. It's a video about what was in your yard before someone decided it shouldn't be, and exactly who profited from that decision. The single most hated entity in suburban real estate, the yellow-headed target of every commercial herbicide on the market, the dandelion. Here is what the lawn care industry never told you about why it keeps coming back no matter how many times you spray it. When soil becomes heavily compacted by construction equipment, by lawnmowers, by the slow accumulation of human foot traffic, grass roots suffocate. They cannot penetrate the dense, clay-like hardpan beneath the surface. The dandelion exists to fix this. Its taproot bores 3 feet straight down, fracturing compacted earth, drawing up deeply buried calcium, iron, potassium, and magnesium, and depositing them directly into the topsoil layer when the plant dies back. It is a biological drill the soil manufactures when it cannot breathe. Every time you spray a dandelion, you are destroying the tool your soil built to repair itself. And the nutritional cost of that aesthetic preference is almost offensive when you look at it directly. A 2016 review in Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine confirmed real anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and anti-diabetic activity in dandelion tissue. The bitter compounds that drive homeowners to madness are the exact phytochemicals that stimulate liver function and regulate blood glucose. The leaves outperform most cultivated grocery greens in vitamins A, C, and E. Dandelion greens are now sold in stores across the country. You can buy them. The same plant growing free in your yard, the one the industry trained you to eradicate, is being retailed at a premium 2 miles away. We are being charged twice. Once to kill it, once to buy it back. Now look down at the ground where you walk most. The sidewalk edges. The compacted paths along the fence, the places where foot traffic has crushed everything else flat. That low-growing plant with the thick parallel veins running down each ribbed leaf, that is plantain. And its presence in the most damaged soil on your property is not a coincidence. Plantain thrives precisely where structural trauma is highest. Indigenous observers in North America documented it spreading along every path that European settlers wore into the earth, reliably appearing wherever the ground had been compressed. They recognized it immediately as a medicinal plant. They called it white man's foot, not as an insult, but as an ecological observation. Where humans damaged the land, this plant appeared to offer something in return. The iridoid glycosides and tannins concentrated in those leaves draw out tissue inflammation, act as localized astringents, and create a physical barrier against contamination. Crush a fresh leaf onto a bee sting, a bite, a minor cut. The inflammation starts easing within minutes. This is not folklore. The mechanism is understood and verified. The young leaves are edible, Brew them into a tea with documented use for respiratory and urinary support. This plant grows without water, without fertilizer, without a single intervention from you. It places itself precisely where injury is most likely to occur. The earth does not leave its inhabitants without resources. We have simply been paying someone to remove them. Before almost anything else wakes up, February, March, when the garden is still frost and mud, the shaded corners of your yard are already producing food. Chickweed, a low, soft carpet of tiny white, star-shaped flowers and mild green leaves, spreading quietly while the rest of the landscape sleeps. Most gardening content frames it as an early-season nuisance to hoe out before it competes with cultivated crops. This is wrong in two directions simultaneously. Chickweed is an ecological indicator that your soil is rich in organic matter and nitrogen. It is not competing with your garden. It is covering your winter topsoil like a thermal blanket, protecting the delicate microbial web beneath from erosion and heavy rain. And the leaves are packed with bioavailable zinc, phosphorus, and calcium. They are mild, slightly grassy, genuinely pleasant raw. In the months when the industrial food supply ships plastic-tasting lettuce thousands of miles on burning fossil fuels, your backyard is already growing something crisp and mineral-dense for free. It is nature's bridge across the lean months, an ancestral survival mechanism we deleted from collective memory in exchange for the convenience of distribution systems we do not control. Drop your location in the comments. I want to build a real map of what's growing where right now. Last time I asked this question, we had responses from 38 states in the first 48 hours. Walk along your fence line where the grass meets the shade. Wild violet. Those small, purple and white flowers tucked into the grass in early spring. Most people yank them out feeling slightly guilty because they're pretty. The guilt is pointing at something real. It just has the wrong explanation. The leaves and flowers are edible, high in vitamin C. The mucilage content soothes respiratory linings. Upscale restaurants in major cities pay specialty foragers significant money to source these flowers as premium edible garnishes. Yours are free. And here is the part that should actually irritate you. Wild violets spread aggressively once established, crowding out the plants you actually hate. Letting them grow is not neglect. It is the cheapest, most effective ground-level weed management available to you. We have allowed a commercial standard of neatness, invented by an industry that profits from maintenance, to override our relationship with genuine economic value. A yard of violets looks like failure to a neighbor. It looks like a premium ingredient to a chef. The question worth sitting with is, who taught you which of those two perspectives was correct? In the shaded corners, along container edges, tucked into the dead space behind the air conditioning unit. Wood sorrel. 3 small heart-shaped leaves, sometimes a purple tint, tiny yellow flowers. Looks almost exactly like a clover. Pick a single leaf, put it on your tongue. It is not grassy. It is not bitter. It is a sharp, electric burst of lemon. An immediate, unmistakable brightness that tastes like something requiring specialized growing conditions and controlled supply chains to produce. It is growing behind your HVAC unit. Wood sorrel contains potassium oxalate, the same compound that gives the tangy brightness to sorrel in French cooking. Sailors used it to prevent scurvy when fruit supplies failed. Today, experimental kitchens in New York and Chicago pay foragers specifically for this plant to use as an acid cut in rich dishes. The system requires you to believe that flavor is something you purchase. Wood sorrel is a standing refutation of that requirement. Enjoy it as an ingredient, not a meal. Oxalic acid warrants moderation, same as spinach or rhubarb, but understand what you are looking at. Luxury is a baseline setting of unmanaged earth. We are halfway through. Here is what is worth naming directly before we continue. Every plant on this list was a documented food and medicine source before the post-war period. None of this is obscure ethnobotany. This is the kind of knowledge that grandmothers carried without writing it down, that moved through generations as practical familiarity rather than published research. The kind of knowledge that doesn't survive when an industry successfully reframes the plants carrying it as evidence of a poorly maintained yard. 1 generation, That is all it takes to lose a food system. The 5 plants remaining are where that loss becomes impossible to look away from. Where the soil has been disturbed, broken ground, garden edges, the corner left unattended after construction, a dusty green giant emerges. Lamb's quarters. This is not a simple weed. One plant can produce 70,000 seeds. Each one is packed with complete proteins, essential amino acids, and iron that makes supermarket spinach look nutritionally vacant. The leaves outperform spinach in calcium, protein, vitamin C, and vitamin A. A single ounce delivers 65% of daily recommended vitamin A. Its seeds are the direct wild ancestor of quinoa. The grain we currently import and retail at $8 to $9 a bag, its progenitor is growing in your backyard, in poor soil, without water, without any assistance from you, asking for nothing. This plant was a staple grain crop in North America for thousands of years before corn displaced it. The displacement did not happen because lamb's quarters was inferior. It happened because corn was easier to commodify. We declared the more nutritionally complex plant a weed and started paying to kill it, then drove to the store to buy the cultivated replacement. We are starving in the middle of a buffet because the plates are not arranged to the neighborhood association's standards. Now let us address the plant that actively fights back, stinging nettle. The moment you brush its leaves, microscopic hollow silica hairs inject formic acid and histamine directly into your skin. It burns, it raises welts, it generates immediate, visceral resentment. But look at the mechanism behind the sting. Nettle is a deep soil accumulator of iron, calcium, silica, and vitamin K. So extraordinarily nutrient-dense that the plant developed a physical security system to prevent complete consumption by animals. The sting is not hostility, it is a security protocol protecting a high-value biological asset. Drop those leaves into boiling water for 30 seconds. The silica hairs dissolve, the acid neutralizes. What remains is a rich, savory green that clinical research confirms functions as a natural antihistamine, a systemic tonic for chronic joint inflammation, and a mineral source for nutrients most Americans are chronically deficient in. In Germany, Austria, and the United Kingdom, nettle tea is integrated into everyday preventive health. It is sold in every grocery store, consumed daily by millions of people as a baseline wellness practice. In the United States, we call code enforcement if it grows past 12 inches. We have traded a genuine health asset for the illusion of a controlled yard. Pick it with gloves, cook it in butter and garlic. You will not believe what you are killing. In the middle of summer, small pinkish-purple pom-pom flowers appear across your grass. Red clover. Most homeowners buy selective broadleaf herbicides to erase them. They are running a spinning blade over a free, soil-borne fertilizer and pharmaceutical system simultaneously. Red clover belongs to the legume family. It has formed a symbiotic relationship with subterranean bacteria to pull nitrogen directly from the air and inject it into your soil. A free, continuous, organic fertilization process that operates around the clock without any input from you. While you pay for synthetic lawn treatment, the plant you are killing is performing the same function at no cost. For the human body, red clover is one of the world's richest sources of isoflavones, phytoestrogen compounds with documented, clinically verified effects. A double-blind trial found red clover isoflavone supplementation reduced spinal bone loss by 45% compared to placebo over 1 year in perimenopausal women. Multiple trials have confirmed meaningful reduction in hot flash frequency. Red clover supplements are currently sold in pharmacies for $15 to $30 a bottle. The flowers and leaves are edible. Dried and brewed, they make a mildly sweet, genuinely pleasant tea. One important note. If you are pregnant, breastfeeding, or managing a hormone-sensitive condition, speak with your doctor before consuming red clover regularly. This plant has real pharmacological activity, which is exactly the point and exactly why it deserves careful respect rather than the mower. If you leave a single corner of your property alone for 1 full season, something will appear that looks like it wandered in from a different century. Mullein. 6, 7, sometimes 8 feet tall. Massive velvety leaves arranged in a ground-level rosette, a towering spike of yellow flowers reaching upward. It grows in gravel driveways, empty lots, neglected fence corners. It looks like it belongs in a forest that no longer exists. It has been in documented medical use for over 2,000 years. Dioscorides, the ancient Greek physician whose botanical records shaped Western medicine, prescribed it specifically for lung disease. Appalachian folk medicine used it in cough syrups and bronchitis preparations. In Ireland, mullein leaves boiled in milk were a traditional tuberculosis treatment. The mechanism is now understood. The leaves contain mucilage that coats and soothes inflamed airway linings, plus saponins that function as natural expectorants, thinning stagnant mucus and forcing the lungs to clear. Mullein capsules, teas, tinctures and oils are sold in health food stores across the country today. People living in polluted urban environments buy them specifically to protect their lungs from industrial smog. The plant they are purchasing is growing through the cracked concrete of their own neighborhood for free. We are searching for wellness in a bottle while wellness grows through our infrastructure. Brew the dried leaves into a tea, strain it carefully, drink it slowly. And now the one I want you to remember after everything else fades. Purslane. Low-growing, thick-stemmed, spreading across bare garden beds and the hot edges of pavement. Thick, reddish stems, small, rounded leaves, tiny yellow flowers. Global botanical surveys identify it as the most widely reported weed species on Earth. It grows on every continent. It grows in conditions that kill most cultivated plants. It contains the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids of any land-based plant ever tested. Let that register. We associate omega-3s with salmon, with fish oil capsules, with expensive supplementation protocols. Purslane contains 5 to 7 times more omega-3s than spinach, 6 times more vitamin E than spinach, 7 times more beta-carotene than carrots. It also contains melatonin, betalains, and a complete mineral spectrum. The World Health Organization lists it as one of the most important medicinal plants in the world. In Mexico, it is a beloved traditional ingredient called verdolaga. In France, it is sold in produce markets. In China, it is called the vegetable for long life. In the United States, we buy a container of chemical poison from a home improvement store, spray it directly onto the purslane, then drive to the pharmacy to purchase an omega-3 supplement. That is the complete triumph of commercial marketing over biological reality. You now know something you cannot unknow. These 10 plants are not accidents. They are not random invasions. They are specific, targeted resources the Earth deploys to correct mineral deficiencies, repair compacted structure, and bridge nutritional gaps in degraded soil. Once you understand the mechanism, once you see the living soil standard operating beneath the surface of your property, you lose the ability to look at a sterile lawn and see order. You see a maintenance cost, a dependency enforced, an ongoing biological rescue mission suppressed at significant personal expense. The soil will not stop offering this. No matter how many times you spray it, no matter how much concrete you pour over it, the land will continue pushing through the cracks, offering free food, free medicine, and a quiet exit from supply chains that were never as stable as they appeared. The question I keep sitting with, and I haven't found a clean answer to it, if this knowledge was never secret, if it lives in Greek medical texts and indigenous oral tradition and colonial farming journals and modern clinical research simultaneously, then what had to be sold for an entire generation to forget it in a single lifetime? This week, before you pull anything, photograph it first. Identification matters. Some plants have lookalikes and certainty is non-negotiable before you eat anything from your yard. Cross-reference with a field guide or a local botanist, but start looking. The food system your land has been trying to give you is still there. It never stopped growing. Drop a comment and tell me, which of these 10 is already coming up on your property right now? I want to see what the soil is trying to tell each of you.